Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jet Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
What is up, Eli?
Nothing much, Rob. It's just a beautiful Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, giving away our secret now. I mean, this is going to go out on Saturday. We have to record a few days early, but that works. So, any other Paladins of Podcast are here on the weekends. We are from. I said future last time.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just bad with dates. It's Saturday at 1 p.m. whatever time you're in.
2 p.m. Eastern time when this goes out.
Yep, that's
what Eli said.
Well, we're recording it. We release it at 2. You know, this is an hour before. This is last minute.
Yeah, down to the wire. Anyhow, tell me about what happened in some of your sessions these last week or two. I don't think we really covered a lot of what you have gone through in the last episode or two.
So my sessions are going pretty great. My party has just kind of entered a new area, and they came across a little hamlet, and right away I introduced a danger. Like the hamlet was threatened by a giant that was stealing their sheep, and when they had approached, I had hinted that there were orcs in the area, just like in the vicinity, and so the party decided to go after the giant, and they were extremely successful, and they thrashed the giant in a very tough combat. The wizard managed to take him out all by himself, but everyone in the party nearly died. That was great. They got a bunch of loot. Struggle. They got a bunch of loot, but now they have to get it back to the hamlet. And so while they were going there, I had some orcs show up and at least spot them and follow them. So they were pretty damaged by the giant, and I've kind of managed to keep the pressure up with the threat of orcs in the area, and that they've kind of found their trail and are tracking them back to the hamlet. And this very last session, the orcs showed up at the hamlet, and they've had a little bit of time to set up and prepare. And this next session is going to be a huge battle.
Nice.
Not to the death. These orcs are they're part of a larger group, so they're just scouting it out. But who knows if my party decides to chase after them or do anything wild and crazy.
Are you hoping they chase after them?
That'd be kind of interesting. It can kind of turn into the situation on the Death Star where Han Solo's chasing after 2 stormtroopers, and he goes around the bend, and there's an entire barracks.
Right. I dig that. Now, Hackmaster is naturally more deadly than other games that are out there, especially currently.
Yep.
So your players have learned the hard way a few times that chasing after may not always be the best thing, but they seem to be the kind of guys that would do it anyway.
I think they might. There's always the chance. I don't think they would actually chase for long enough to run into a bad situation, but they might decide to follow the next day, or have some of their more nimble, stealthy people just follow.
Yeah.
I'm expecting something to that extent might happen. Which would be wonderful. because then they would discover the larger orc group that's taken over another a local gnome village. So
Okay,
that can kind of just spiral into more adventures if they want to try to save some gnomes. They're gnomies.
Right. Yeah. No, it's nice. Nice. I dig it. That sounds fun. Now, is that something that you kind of had planned out already, or did you piece a few of those things together as story naturally progressed?
In this case, I always wanted there to be kind of orcs in this area, but I hadn't necessarily established any mention of these orcs. So I was kind of looking around, and I was like, how could I get some orcs here? Or like, where would they come from? And I noticed a local mountain pass, and I was like, oh, well, if orcs migrate from somewhere else, they're probably going to come in here, and well, this looks like the most likely village they'd take over, and so that's just kind of grown into having like an orc threat in this area. So that's kind of how that's developed.
Yeah, I like that.
I usually try to set, like, once I've added something to the scene, like to the world, I'll try to set some like hard rules for myself about like what they'll do. Like so I've introduced these orcs, or I've got this growing undead threat that the party didn't deal with.
Mm-hmm.
They like ended up releasing an ancient evil, and then they kind of got distracted by a million other things and forgot about it.
Sure.
That undead evil is slowly attracting strengths. So I have a rule where every month that goes by in game time, I roll a d20, and that's how many undead followers this force gathers to its strength. And then I've set thresholds at where like different amount of rumors will start to spread, and like where they'll hit in the area, so that the party can relearn about this danger.
Right. I dig that.
How do you like to handle stuff like that? Like, do you set rules like that for yourself, or when does the things happening in the background progress?
So things in the background progress in two different formats when I'm planning my games. The first format is, as I'm making the plan for the world, I kind of determine who is where and what's going on. When the players find out about those, sometimes they progress the story naturally by attaching to those storylines and progressing them that way. The second way is more organic, where after a little bit of time has gone on and things haven't changed, I update what the background noise has been doing.
But my question is, when do you do that update? Like, when is a little bit of time goes by for you?
It really depends on where my players are in accordance to that background noise, if that makes sense. So I don't do it like every 4 sessions or every month in game time. It comes down to, if my players are in a vicinity where I have established a little bit of history there with organizations, criminals, etc., then I will start to figure out where they've been to, where that background noise is going, and what they're developing. But until then, I've just got essentially the seed in the pot, and it doesn't start growing until it becomes necessary. Sometimes that seed is already a fully developed tree before my players get there, because my mind ran with it. But I would say on average, I plan it out enough to adventure if they wanted to look into it further and develop it that way. But if they decide to just leave it, it will continue to grow, and eventually they will have to deal with it.
So my question, just to maybe specify a little more, is like, if I'm away and like the party's adventuring for 9 months somewhere else, I could come back to this undead carrot thing I set and be like, oh shoot, I haven't touched this rumor in 9 game months, and I'd be like, all right, I roll 9d20 and yada yada. But I have that set. So like, if you haven't touched something in 9 in-game months, do you have a timeline for how that advanced? Or do you, like, how do you know how much to adjust your things developing in the background?
I go with it by feel. So it's a lot of things that I've based some of my organizations or character NPC noise out of happened in real life. So we generally don't stray too far from one day at a time. So I think the most any of my parties have progressed in the last few months has been 2 days in game at a time. And so realistically, the only reason some of them are months from where they started is because we are months from where we started, and we had a time jump in there when 2 of our players left. We allowed for I think it was 2-month period of downtime, and that progressed a little bit of the background stories farther. Sometimes they need explanation. Sometimes it's just it got bigger and they don't care, so they don't look into it.
Yeah, I guess scale matters a lot here, because in my Hackmaster game, because you can have such long downtime from training or healing from massive wounds, you could have months pass by if you or a month pass by and you trained. So
right. Whereas we kind of fast tracked some of that, and our general story is progressed actively. So I guess for me, it's a little bit differently set up than it would be for you in your Hackmaster game. But neither one of them seem bad, nor do they seem wrong.
No, not at all.
So I guess I don't want to say different folks, different strokes, but different systems and whatever rhymes with that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm bad at rhyming.
Oh, dude, same thing. I keep trying to go with orange, but I haven't found one thing yet.
Your silver's good. So how are your sessions?
So Contingency Heroes is doing pretty well. They went on a long trip through the Ebon Desert, found the Ebon Oasis and the Cthulhu cultist sinking pyramid that travels on the back of a dragon turtle. After drawing from the deck of many things and defeating a very weakened awakened star spawn, they were gifted as payment with
It's such a mouthful. So much goes on in your games. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah. Did I just mention that they drew from the deck of many things?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that was fun. They ended up chasing into a Cthulhu cult vanishing pyramid and defeated a recently awakened star spawn. And the power source for the star spawn is actually the cursed King Vasalis from Twisted Justice that they had just awoken recently.
Tying those campaigns together.
I'm doing what I can. They won, defeated it, found a huge throne room from Cthulhu cultists from centuries, opened up a small portal that they're familiar with to talk to a black market dark elf who is actually a bad guy, a very bad guy, but they love him. They love this bad guy to death, by the way. Like, he's super friendly, super honest, tells them everything, and they know that they cannot get in and out of a conversation or interaction with him without screwing over themselves somehow, but they're failing forward by leaps and bounds.
I have a question. So you've got these bad guys that are oftentimes reoccurring and are often in scenes with the party.
Yeah.
How do you keep the party from just killing these reoccurring villains?
They totally know that they're way above their power level.
Okay.
Like, some of them, they're absolutely scared shitless from. Some of them, they know that no matter what, they're not going to be able to take them on right now. And this one in particular, named Olek, the black market guy, not only do they know he's far outside of their power range, but they don't want to kill him, and they hope to God they never have to, because he is a really likable bad guy. They know he's bad, but they like him. They get something that they want to offload. They're like, we should contact the Olek guy. So, I mean, he freely gives out information, and there's always a weird caveat. So when they found this Cthulhu treasure room, cultist treasure room, they found a treasure chest with a diamond-shaped glass diamond shape full of black sand. That's evil power. One of our paladins needed to find, and roll
back. you have some paladins that are just gleefully working with known super evil entities?
This is the first time he's met him. So I picked up a new player.
What happened there at the table between your players?
Let me tell you about another scenario that we got to skip, okay?
All right.
I'm gonna let me pin the Cthulhu thing. All of my players are supposed to be heroes. Good guys. At the end of the day, when the campaign wraps up, they're supposed to say, I may have had some struggles, but I am a good guy. I made a hero, changed the world in a positive light, whatever fluffy bunny chocolate you want to add on top of that. I had a scene where they needed to contact a gladiatorial sponsor in the city of Ebon, which is known for its gladiatorial rings. This particular gladiatorial sponsor is known to be one of the worst bosses. He's known to openly buy slaves, specifically to throw into the gladiatorial pits. He's known to torture his slaves. And when they were talking to him, he was whipping an individual, and they asked him a question that this individual would know the answer to or not, and he whipped him in order to get the information. So he is actively torturing this guy chained to a wall, whipping him. And my players, who are supposed to be heroes, did nothing. Nothing. To the point where I felt a little weird. I was like, you guys are supposed to be heroes. Like, this feels wrong. You guys are just going to let it go, but okay. And I asked them about it in a game later. And I'm like, the hell was up with that? They're like, nah, man, when you're in Rome, you don't screw with that shit. It's how they do things. We just let it slide. And I looked at the paladin, and I was like, are you serious? He's like, it was effective. I'm like, you're a paladin, buddy. Like, I've seen your character sheet. What the hell is going on? So now we start the horrible cursed path of, if you don't follow the edicts in which you prescribe to, you lose the opportunity to use the power that's gifted to you.
Are you going to take away the paladin's power?
If he continues to walk down the path of not giving a damn if the slave is being tortured or not, I might have to go that route.
So, like, how many more times could they stand before someone being whipped before you do that?
Well, they understand and they believe that it's the law of the land. So, as a lawful character, they are at least under the belief that not interrupting is the correct thing to do. They know it's not technically legal, but it's more of like an open, dirty secret. So we'll let this one fall into, if I was to put on a scale of 1 to 5, this one falls around the 3 to 4 range. Okay. If they've got a few marks against them that are pushing 4 to 5, I'd say I let it happen 5 or 6 times before there's a full shift and they're cut off from their deity.
So, like, at your table, like, what is a, like, you know, because every table has different limits. What is your 5? What is your deity? Like, you lose your powers. Like, what is an event like that?
The first time it happened was when the powerful cleric prayed to another god.
Okay, so praying to another god is that's a cutoff.
Pretty big no. Other things continue to be if you do not adhere to your prescribed edicts that you believe in, even if it's a code of honor, if you are constantly ignoring it. So certain little things, may have a bad day, we're not going to stack those up against you until it becomes 100% constant. But if you're starting to do things like just murdering people without really considering what goes beyond and why they're doing certain things, that's when we start to stack them up. And
right. So how many times do you, as a GM, have to have?
It depends.
A paladin murder someone at your table.
So if we want to go with murder, if they're just going to straight up murder somebody and not really have a reason to it, they'd probably.
A player has a reason for everything.
Yeah, but a character who can't justify it, probably looking at 1 or 2. If they're murdering evil outsiders who are hell-bent on destroying the world, doesn't count. If they are murdering
at your table, how do you how do your characters justify it without the players justifying it? Like, when you have one of these breaking moments, do your players talk about it? What if they don't?
Sometimes they do. It depends on the situation or the moment. So a lot of them choose to fly by the seat of their pants. It works out for a moment or two, and then it tends to really screw them over in the end, and they slowly learn from that. So it's one of those things where, again, I don't have a set number. I generally go by how often they commit large atrocities based on their edicts before they lose it. They only get 4 or 5 chances before they... Well, let me rephrase that. They get 4 or 5 chances without atoning or trying to make corrections. If they just continue to push that envelope and never atone for anything, yeah, it's a pretty quick process. If they're trying to be good but keep getting in situations where they feel like it's the only possibility, they feel bad, they atone for it, they try to do a few good things, and it takes them a while to do the next one, a little bit more leeway. But there's no set and hard rule.
It sounds like you're trying to put them in a lot of those positions where it's like, it sounds like you're trying to put them in a lot of morally gray, or the situations where you're like, this is probably bad, but we're getting results.
Not usually, or not intentionally. The slave trader, intentional, first real intentional one. And I was hoping that at least say something or try to save the guy. You know, they had the cash. They could have bought him and set him free. You know, they know that he's going to the gladiatorial pits. They know that he survived his first round and he's getting whipped to see if he has it in him to continue his training to actually be a gladiator. Like, they could have done something and they chose to do nothing. And like, my hope that they want to be heroes is, it's not dashed, but it feels kind of like I feel a little let down. I want better from them.
Talk to the players about being heroes? Is that their goal?
Yes, I told them they had to be heroes. They all prescribed that. And I keep reminding them that they have to be heroes. So when it happened, I reminded them. It's like, you guys are supposed to be heroes. And they're like, just the law of the land. When in Rome. It's like, no, you know it's wrong. So, yeah. Other than that, Twisted Justice changed their group name from Twisted Justice to Twisted Health Conditions. And the funny story there is that most of them have some sort of health conditions as people, like my hand, for example, and diabetes, seizures, neurodivergences, back problems, gallbladder problems. And so the joke just kind of became the team name.
Well, I am sorry to hear that.
They all thought it was hilarious, so it's a win for them.
Huzzah!
Huzzah! But yeah, to comment on what you said, there's a lot of world-altering things and huge powers that my players end up going through, giving them all the scope of what's going on, and they're having a good time with it.
So how are you bringing that same energy into what I hear you're writing?
I hope so.
You're working on an edition for 5th E.
Yes, I am working on a 5th edition compatible adventure. And right now the working title is the Legend of the Pharaoh King. And it is set in the desert city of Anakaris. And right now the plan is to have the players of the adventure meet a shady merchant who has some information, who's looking for treasure from this pyramid. Split it with them if they go and collect it from the pyramid.
And what's the twist?
I think right now it's going to be a straight campaign with no huge twist, but I'm also considering that the shady merchant is actually the one who ended up setting the curse in motion, and he's too afraid to go back into the pyramid, wants somebody else to do it so he can still reap the rewards without suffering the curse itself.
Okay. How long of an adventure you work? How is it intended to be?
I'm not sure. the way I am writing it, I am kind of following the general narrative as if you would see in a film. So I kind of look at each scene or chapter in a book, kind of what happens from this scene, how does it play out in the next scene, what are the main points, follow that until the end. So I think I'll end up basing it on pyramid floors. So as they navigate the pyramid like a dungeon, it'll be 3 or 4 different floors with a large central chamber with an undead mummy lord.
So before I ask you about how you the process of how you're writing it and working it out,
yeah,
what makes this adventure different than another adventure, like another tomb raiding adventure? Because this is kind of like the stereotypical raiding a pyramid, right?
Yeah, it'll likely start that way until I get hit by inspiration to change it by a great direction. I don't want to say I like to work off the backbone of what other people have already done, but you're right. It's kind of the run-of-the-mill go at it. And the way I feel about most pre-written adventures or modules is that they are all generally run-of-the-mill. Like, the things that make certain adventures or modules really stick out are the iconic old school ones where you look at the Tomb of Horrors, where it was nothing but absolute deadly. The Emerald Spire, again, another super dungeon, just extra deadly, where they're iconic for being crappy, essentially. I don't want to follow in the same route, but I want something that is highly dangerous, highly deadly, but entertaining. So I got to kind of figure out a way out to combine those two without irritating entire swaths of players. But on the same side, whereas 5th E's super deadly dungeons, where 5e is nearly impossible to kill a lot of people.
What theme, or is it going to be high lethality? Is there anything that inspires this adventure for you? Are you basing it off of anything? Movies, films, books?
A lot of the mummy material. I want to say mummy material because, yeah, the mummy films with Brendan Fraser are a huge kind of leading aspect for the adventure portion. But again, when you're looking at adventure, I also consider Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom or The Last Crusade, as well as a lot of the old school mummy films and books that kind of started to define that horror film genre back when they were released. So taking a lot of those different aspects and maybe throwing in some campy Bruce Campbell Army of Darkness style fun.
I like it. So. How are you going into writing this? What is your process for writing this adventure? Do you have an outline of how the entire adventure will look like? Just starting from the beginning?
Just starting from the beginning. So what I do is because I'm so visually minded in a lot of my storytelling, when I think, I kind of sit down, look at scene 1, kind of say, hey, this is how scene 1 would play out, write scene 1, and then when we change locations, I don't have to write that process from how do we get from A to B for those 2 scene locations. I just can start writing B. So I like it. It's kind of like writing a film without filling in the BS.
So, to bring up the railroad question, how are you laying out your scenes?
Could you elaborate your question?
I mean, if you've got scene A, B, C, are they hitting all those scenes in order? Or how do they progress through all the scenes you have?
The first few scenes are essentially your introductory scenes. Those should be progressed through order. You meet the guy, you hit up the bar, you find the guide. I said guy last time, but I'm going to say merchant because you meet the merchant, you hit up the bar, you find the guide, you get to the temple, you get in. That's pretty standard fare. I have left it open-ended enough where there's a few NPCs rolling around the city if they decide to go get more information or not hit up the guide that I've kind of named in there already. But if they want to play straightforward, I have it laid out. If they want to play roundabout, it's open-ended enough for the DM to say, hey, I got information to work with. Once they get inside the temple, it'll be a little bit more freeform because you don't have to check out every room. You can check out whatever room you want in whatever order you want. So once I get into developing that section, it'll just be a collection of rooms and dungeons, descriptions, monsters, encounters, etc. Wandering monsters, the whole deal. And then towards the end, it will have a boss room and conclusion section. I figure that's pretty simple.
Okay. Yeah. How, so like when you say scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, are there multiple, do I say encounters in between them, like in them? Or is scene 2 actually seeing just one scene, one set, NPC interaction or combat or...
Yeah, right now it's one scene, one set. Open enough where if the players decide to go a little off the rails in one or two directions, there's I have at least a thought process there established for the DM. But again, they can always modify and interpret it however they would like for what works for their table. So
I've taken one of those scenes in hand. Do you like to write out like, I remember Craig was very into like writing descriptive text. Mm-hmm. How much do you lean into descriptive text, or maybe some of the more, I've seen in some other adventures where they really just hit bullet points, like where they describe key aspects of the room without writing in like a read aloud box, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think right now my read aloud boxes is perfect for what exactly they are. They come down to about a paragraph to maybe 2, and I don't mean like big paragraphs. They're small. In fact, I can read you one right now, and it was probably the longest one I got. It'll take me less than a minute.
If you feel like you want to.
Yeah. As you enter the Sandstorm Inn, the smell of spices and cooking meat fills your nostrils. The place is crowded and noisy, with travelers from all over the city mingling in a bar or huddled around tables. You spot a few familiar faces from the bazaar, including the friendly spice merchant Hassan. As you scan the room, your eyes are drawn to a lone figure in the back corner of the tavern. She's a woman with sturdy build, dressed in simple but well-worn clothing. Her dark hair is pulled back in a tight braid, and she seems to be in deep in thought, and she sips at a mug of ale. You get the feeling that she's not just someone to be trifled with. Could this be the guide that Hassan had mentioned?
So it seems great. It's lots of description of the area around, what they're seeing. Are you also writing like read aloud text for like what the NPCs say?
Only if it is even a 3-sentence monologue. So for
more like response bubbles instead of this.
No response bubbles. More like introductory bubbles. So again, another small read aloud bubble is this one's the first one that comes across. As you wander through the bustling streets of Anakaris, you hear whispers of a mysterious black pyramid that has recently appeared in the desert outside of town. As you stop to inquire about the rumors, you are approached by a tall, dark-skinned man with a sly grin and sharp glint in his eye. "Greetings, travelers," he says with a bow. "My name is Hassan, and I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I happen to know a thing or two about that pyramid you're so curious about. In fact, I can take you straight to it, for a small fee, of course." So, I mean, it's just the bare bones introductory phrase. And again, these are things that can be modified from a DM at the table, so it fits a little bit better. Just kind of keeping it pretty basic. There's a section in here where there's an encounter. They can spot the encounter, and I got some bullet points for the DM that they're not really interested in fighting, but if they have a preferred method, but if the party wants to engage, they can go ahead and engage. And then if the party decides to attack, if the party just ends up defeating them, if they decide to spare the bandits, if they just ignore them, there's kind of how it would really play out for either one of them based on the personalities that are developed for the bandits. So,
you got a deadline for this?
Matt, I would like to have this done by the end of Sunday.
By the end of Sunday, like this week.
I would love to, but I haven't worked on it in 3 days. Like I'm trying to get it done before I'll likely have to go back to my 9 to 5. So,
is it just poor timing, or have you tried to sit down and work on it?
I've been really enamored with other things like the tracker squares that I've been building for physical products to sell. So Epic Table Games has a lot of neat ideas that I want to get out there, and this one has captivated my attention very, very deeply recently.
Have your players had an opportunity to use those trackers yet?
They have seen them, and they've given small critiques on them, and they're interested in using them, but I have not had anything finished enough for them to do so.
This next session?
I really hope so, because I've got one on Saturday, today, that I can at least make 2 or 3 for, especially considering that these only take about 15-20 minutes to do out. So,
sweet. That's exciting.
Thank you. Now, I want to talk about those questions that you had asked me as well, and I want to finish the episode out with these because it's super interesting.
Yeah. So the other day I was just trolling through or strolling through various RPG Reddits, and I came across a comment where at the start of the session, or at the start of a campaign, the GM for this player ran through a couple, basically a couple 3 scenarios, just some real quick ones, just maybe a couple minutes each time, to just see how the player would handle it. And this person was saying that it really helped them like wrap their heads around how to play this character and get into it a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a fascinating idea. And so I asked you a couple days ago about if you'd use it and what questions you'd use. And first off, I want to ask, do you think this would be something you'd run with one player, just like in a one-on-one session? Or do you think this would be something that you run individually for each player at a session 0, so that the other players could see their responses?
Well, I think immediately what I would do is, if I was going to do this at a session 0 during pre-campaign character planning, I would probably have it on a printout, and each player would have one there. They'd all get asked either the same question or a variation of questions in the same topics. One of the first things I answered was save a kitten. Like, how would you go about saving a cat? It's a cute creature. People generally have soft spots for animals. Lets me know how they feel about animals. Of course, certain people also like to play personality types that are different from in real life people. Other than that, I'm like, how they deal with like torture? I just had something going on with that. Wonder how they would deal with that. Or how they confront with a powerful being that was just too powerful to destroy or overtake. It's hard for me because I was playing.
How do you like put those last, like the first one's easy, like,
yeah,
in a quick role playing one, like your character comes across a kitten in a tree, or like, how do you save it? But how do you do those last 2? Do you just do the same exact thing? Your character comes across a god. What do you do? Or do you ask them how do they handle it? Or are you asking for the meta level, like, I think my character would handle it in this direction? Or are you thinking more in the, like, have them role play, like, talk it out as if they were their character?
I think part of that comes down to how I would ask the question. And I have to imagine that if I'm writing the question down, it would be along the lines of, I'm writing it as if I am DMing it. So the kitten one would be, you're walking through a city street and some young girl is crying, and she spots you and she yells that her kitten is stuck in a tree or fell down a well and she wants somebody to save it. What would you do in that situation? So as those questions kind of progressed larger, it would be similar. I'd build a small scenario, drop their character into it, and ask them how they would handle it. Obviously, something like you run into a incredibly powerful deity, they'd be like, I got no idea what the hell I'm going to do. So I'd probably scale it back down. What would you do in a situation where you had to slay every undead in a city, but you find out that a childhood best friend is among them?
I think that the God one would be great for your table, because it seems like your parties are always running into those style characters. It seems like if the player doesn't know how to answer that question, they are going to have a tough time.
To be fair, contingency heroes will probably befriend it, find a way to get on the same level, and make a good deal. So they always come out ahead. So,
do they always come out ahead?
Yeah, no. But they're smiling while they're walking that paved road to hell.
Heroes.
I know. Heroes. Anyway, how are you feeling about it? How would you present it? Like, where do you think it would be best fit in? Like pre-campaign? Would you drop it in somewhere in the middle of a campaign to get a feel for how their characters would be acting, or how they feel like their characters are doing, 22 sessions in?
I really like it as an idea. I think like one of the games I play, Wild Sea, has it like kind of roughly in that, where before each like different aspect of a character that you could play, it has questions you should ask yourself if you want to play this class or this character, this origin. And it kind of has some wacky or strange questions that kind of key into the theme of that ability.
Okay.
And I think that's great, because I think if you can like asking those questions about your character, or like it helps you frame your character as a person, as opposed to just a set of stats. Which can happen. I mean, in quite a number of games that don't have abilities that tie into narrative aspects of your character, your characters just lack those narrative elements. It's a lot harder to roleplay those. Or I guess it can be easier since you have no restrictions.
Well, I mean, I look at it like I don't want to say the new player syndrome, but when you're just starting out, a lot of times you fall into one of two camps. You're not sure exactly what to do, so you don't really role play. You just roll dice. But there are some people who lean into it super heavily and kind of go overboard. I think questions like this help really define a character, so it helps bring people who are into it. I don't want to say too much, because that sounds bad, but if they lean into one aspect too heavily, this can help round that out, so they're better role playing all over. And those who just roll dice can help bring them into role playing a little bit more.
See, I don't see it as a new player problem. I think new players are the best. New players are the ones who, when you tell them or ask them about a scenario, they will answer honestly, because they don't know how to frame everything in the rule system.
Right.
I think it's longer term players or the people that really know a system that are the toughest ones to shake, of thinking in the system first and not thinking of how their character would just act.
I can see that, and I've had that experience before. The players I have right now are definitely more character minded than system minded, so that might be jading my current opinion. Like if you ask me if I had a different party, my answer might be completely different as well. So one of those things that right now I'm only in the fishbowl I'm in, Again, though, I love it. I love the questions and ask. I think I would actually sit down and ask not only at the beginning of a campaign, but also mid-campaign, and more than once. Not the same questions, but questions along the same lines.
Would you use them to, like I had mentioned, the Godhood one, that seems to have quite a big impact on your games. Like, would you ask them questions like that to gauge how they'll react, or how they might interact with a future situation you might present with them?
I hadn't even thought about it in that aspect yet. But yes, I think that would actually work out really well. My initial thought was that I could utilize it to help them kind of realize where their character is sitting. So that way, what they feel like their character is versus what they're actually doing may be more apparent to them themselves.
Yeah. That way they know like what. Yeah, that way they can just like recheck in with how their character's personality.
Yeah.
In a impactless role play session or role play a little bit. Would you stick to 3 questions? Because I feel like if you're doing it repeatedly, it might be good just to.
I think 3 questions is a pretty solid number. 5 feels too much like a quiz. 1 doesn't feel like it drives a point home. But 3 different topics, because you could really cover kind of like heartstrings. You could cover character option based on what they said that they were going to do versus what they are doing. And then you could kind of throw one in left field to see how they would respond to unusual situations or settings.
Yeah, I definitely like 3 for a beginning of the campaign. But I think if I was going to do it like a repeat of it in the middle of a game, I would do a different question to each of my players.
Mm-hmm.
Only do 1 question for each. Just so that it didn't... I mean, because it'll be enjoyable and it'll be... But it is one, you have the spotlight on one person at a time, and there is some there's a significant amount of downtime for the, X other number of players.
Right. Which is why, like, I would end up likely doing it written, so that way they could just fill it out, drop it back in their envelope, send it my way.
Written? So, I didn't think about it being written.
Yep, I like to do a lot of write-outs.
I don't know if I necessarily love it written. I do maybe at the beginning of a campaign.
True.
But I like the aspect of having them talk it out loud, and especially out loud with each other, so that they can kind of check in on like their, not only what their character is, but knowing where other people sit is also important. Like if everyone's evil, then you're like, oh yeah, we're just all evil. But if you're like, oh, I had no idea that character had that aspect.
That's true. And I like that. I think I got a few people who like to try to play edgelords, so they may not like to be upfront about some of their character aspects. Thinking about 2 players in particular.
Sometimes you got to call out edgelords so that they realize that some of their ideas are not that healthy.
More than true. But yeah, I like the system. I like the ideas. I like the questions.
I think I'm going to try it. I might try it this Sunday. I'm thinking about if I'm going to write questions specific for each player, or if I'm just going to write 6. I might just write 6 questions and then toss them out.
I think it would be great if you had different questions for each player. So next time you ever did it again, you just give everybody a different question, but it's out of the initial 6 pool. So
yeah, I might do something like that. But what I was thinking is more like when I said 1 specific for each character is, I would have more of a targeted question towards maybe their backstory or something that we don't necessarily know about that character.
Okay. That's fair.
Because at this point we've played for a while, so we know how some characters will react in a myriad of unusual or maybe strange situations already.
Like yellow mold tea.
Yellow mold
your
tea.
Party, drink it.
Yum, yum, yum.
Fair. I really look forward to hearing about how that goes. So make sure you keep me updated on that. I think the listeners would like to check it out too.
I'll have an update next time.
Sounds good. Other than that, you got anything else you want to close out our episode with?
I love Dragonlance, and I'm reading some of the old Dragonlance adventures. And yeah, Dragonlance is cool. Check it out.
I dig it.
I recommend playing the adventures or reading the books, and not both.
No, one or the other, because you generally get pretty particular depending on which one you do.
Shazam.
All right, guys. Check us out on Facebook or online at epictablegames.com. And I got a blog post up.
Tell some friends about us.
Would love that. Good night.
Sweet dreams.
Okay, new intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.